Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Exponential Potential. And we have got a really, I'm going to say juicy, but it's going to be a different energy than normal. We've got a really good, solid conversation ahead. I'm joined today by Fabrice Demaresco. Hi, Fabrice.
Hey, Claire.
Who, to be honest, we have been so lucky to bag as a guest, I have to say. So Fabrice is a seasoned partner at McKinsey, and works very closely with many CEOs and senior teams. You've been on a transformative journey of leadership evolution. And what I love about your bio, what I love about your background is that you combine Eastern spiritual traditions into Western management, and that you use that to elevate performance and consciousness. And I think that's so crucial. You describe working in a world that's filled with complexity, and with so many of the leaders that I work with, they're in the grip of busyness and what next and what next and what next. But actually, you weave through those elements that look at fundamental humanity, fundamental human happiness, and build out from there. So, Fabrice, welcome. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I think this is fun. Thank you for having me.
So, in a nutshell, can you describe the kind of, or can you give examples of the work that you do with CEOs, and just let's start to hint at some of these practices that you introduce.
Sure. So I work with senior executives, mostly CEOs, and I work with their teams. And the mandate that I'm given is usually to work with them on the softer side of things. As you know, I work for a well-known and prestigious consulting company called McKinsey. We're very well known for strategy and transformation and helping clients with their performance. We tend, and that's our upbringing, to look at the hard side of leadership, right? Numbers, performance metrics, how to go from A to B in a way that is predictable and safe and reliable and that will deliver all the benefits that we expect. So in a way, the very traditional view of Western management. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but very often I find that it covers only part of the picture that the leader must be aware of. And so that's where I come in. I bring the softer side of transformations. What is going to be the impact of a transformation on the culture of the organization? What is going to be the impact of the transformation on our own psyche, our own psychology, our own motivation, our own inspiration? Are we going to find more fulfillment? Or how do we find fulfillment through this transformation? How do we find the energy to run a business and at the same time transform it? So all these aspects is what I work with leaders on, and it's an absolutely endless source of fascination, conversations. I learn so much every day from the clients I work with. We're sort of breaking new ground. If you go to the Western literature on leadership, there's some things, but there's not much that has been written on how do you not only look at the hardcore cognitive aspects of business, but also how do you look at the energetic aspects of business? How do you look at the emotional aspects of business? How do you look at the more spiritual aspects of business, which have been well covered in parts of the Eastern spiritual traditions, but we don't find much of that in the West. So, we're really at the leading edge of what can be done in terms of balancing the yin and the yang of business, creating more purpose, creating more fulfillment. not looking at the world in an either or, right? It's either performance or, we're going to be a happy bunch of hippies, but we're not going to achieve much. I'm trying to break this view that, you can actually have both. You can have fulfillment and purpose and emotional energy and spiritual energy, and at the same time deliver business results in a way that hopefully doesn't screw up the planet, right? I mean, excuse my French, but I was brought up in Paris. So, how can we be delivering performance today that doesn't come at the cost of the future generations and the planet, in a way that makes us all happy and engaged and inspired? So that's the brief.
It's it's profound, and I can see how challenging it can be to the status quo. But when you talk about, we're not going to be a bunch of hippies. If you think about some of the kind of Eastern archetypes of power, so let's go back. Let's go to the samurai. Would anyone describe a samurai as a hippie?
No, apart from the long hair.
Developing deeply spiritual practices, it kind of unlocks a different kind of power, a different kind of balance. And particularly within Eastern philosophy and Eastern culture and Eastern history, it's not an either or. So sometimes it feels a bit sad that in the West we'd forgotten that. Although I think times are perhaps changing. Um, what I love about the introduction there is I can see the organic shift to that thinking that's happening. We're in danger of spouting leadership theory to everybody here, so we'll have to try to describe it in the best way that we can. But I've noticed a shift that's moved towards more collective organizations where you inspire and you energize teams towards a collective goal. There's definitely been that shift. Sometimes it's been around collective ownership across the West, but it's still not quite far enough. I think it hints, but it still holds on to this sense of people as a group of resources and skills, as opposed to people as fundamental humans that bring all of their energy to the table for the collective.
Yeah, and this the West has evolved toward a model that is very individual. I mean, we've become a very individualistic society, and that has not happened at the same pace in Asia. Asian societies are still much more collective. People are much more oriented towards the greater good. I don't want to idealize Asian societies, but there is a collective consciousness in Asia that we have lost in the West. Now, I'm lucky enough to be based in Asia. I've lived all my adult life in Asia, so I have this I'm essentially immersed in this culture, and that's one aspect that I want to bring to my clients, which resonates very, very well with leadership teams. I think there's a growing consciousness that the success of an organization is not an individual game. I think we've wasted far too much time with the cult of the hero CEO, glorifying one person. It doesn't matter whether the organization has 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 employees. We glorify one person. And we attribute all the successes and all the failure of that organization to one person, which is completely ridiculous. And increasingly, research shows that actually the impact of a CEO is relatively modest. we see that when we study CEOs that carry out successful transformation at one place and then they go to another company and they're not that successful. There's actually very little correlation between the success in one role and the success in the following role. So that shows that actually one individual, if he or she does not try to inspire a collective, does not try to create collective accountability for the results that we're delivering, will very likely deliver random results. These results could be good or the results could be terrible. But glorifying a CEO for the results is a little bit like applauding the monkey that throws darts at random and once in a while hits the bull eyes. Yes, once in a
Yeah.
while a monkey will be lucky. And I'm not comparing the CEOs to monkeys, don't get me in trouble here, but there's, unless we find ways to harness the collective energy of an organization, I think whatever results are delivered are largely random. And we see that increasingly through the research. So that's how can we re-inject through which tools, because we have to be very pragmatic, right? And we don't have years to carry out these transformations. So how pragmatically can we take, for example, a leadership team and turn what is 99% of the time a collection of individuals, all very bright, all very talented, all very ambitious,
Yep.
but who do not know how to work together because of plenty of reasons, from egos to lack of alignment to misaligned ideals or ideas of what they want to do with the company, a whole bunch of reasons. How can we take this collection of individuals and turn them into a real team that operates as nicely and smoothly as some of the best NBA basketball teams, right? Or the
Yeah.
best British Premier League football teams, where everyone has to work together to win the match or to win the season. It's not a collection of individuals. So how can we create that? So that's one of the topics where I spend a lot of time on, and with the client teams that I work with, that me and my team work with, we spend a lot of time shifting this consciousness from we're a bunch of individuals and we each deliver our own KPIs in our own little silos to we're collectively accountable for the destiny of this company. And then we trickle it down to the next layer down, and the next layer and the next layer.
Yeah.
And when it works, I tell you, Claire, it's beautiful. And then you can say the results are no longer random. Because once everyone is aligned, you become totally unbeatable.
I know from my own leadership journey, that's a culture that I try to espouse. And when you inspire and release control and autonomy and inspire to lift, there's almost you almost tap into extra resources, kind of extra energy that people bring. They're not as stuck. And as a leader, it's so empowering because letting go of power brings you more, it feels more empowering because you don't have to lift the heavy loads anymore. Is that something that you find?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the key word here is empowering. We come from a model, and that is still what is taught, in business schools and all the leadership development programs. And that's how the corporate world is organized. It's a pyramid organization with a command and control model. And while in some situations you need that, because that model provides simplicity and predictability, and you know that every task that must be done is broken down in individual parts, and then every unit produces their little contribution to the collective. But what you obtain in an organization like that is a result that is equal to the sum of the parts and nothing else, nothing more. This model was developed at least 150 years ago at the turn of the second industrial revolution, when suddenly we went from largely, agriculture-based economy to an industrial economy, because we were able to get coal and oil from the ground. And so suddenly we have immense amounts of energy. And so we can build factories at large scale. And we have to scale production in ways that were unimaginable, in the 18th century. And suddenly, at the turn of the 19th century, we can scale. And that's where you have, the enormous steel mills and all these, heavy industries that allowed us to create all the infrastructure that we have in the modern world today. But in order to manage these large systems, you needed mechanisms that were, developed by Frederick Taylor and a bunch of thinkers of the time, Henry Ford and the rest. This was based on the premise that people at the top knew better because they were well educated, they were literate, and they were the representative of the capital. And the folks at the bottom, the workers, were uneducated, illiterate, and you could pay them peanuts. So having the top tell the bottom what to do and controlling them and pay for performance. If you produce 3 widgets, I'll pay you $3. And if you produce 20 widgets, I'll pay you $20. This kind of systems was all based on a system where people at the bottom were uneducated, didn't know, had to be pushed, because the work was also very tedious, because it was mostly labor, hard labor, muscular work with your hands, dig the coal out of the ground, assemble the things on the assembly line. Now, fast forward 150 years, we're in a knowledge economy. We no longer do work, with our hands for the most part. The folks at the bottom, who are mostly, Gen Z, tend to be better educated. They know more about what's going on in the world than the folks at the top. And we're still imposing a command and control model that was invented 150 years ago, with archaic processes like budgets, which are supposed to predict what the future will look like, standard operating procedures that say, this is how you do things and this is not how you do things. And if you want to deviate from the way of doing things, you need to ask for approval. And the person who's supposed to give you approval will ask for another person for approval. And these endless bureaucratic circuits that may have made sense in a different environment, but absolutely do not make sense for most situations today, at least in the knowledge economy. And so we're running on a completely archaic organizational system that hasn't evolved at all. I mean, we're still producing budgets. I mean, budgets were invented 150 years ago, when people didn't have, they were still using abacus. And that's when we had budgets to control the spending, know where we are in our spending, in our revenue, etc. But it's totally inappropriate for our world today. And the proof is, look at the millions of hours that each large corporation has wasted in December 2019 to produce a budget for 2020, and then COVID happened. So your budget was worth absolutely nothing. Same thing in December 2021, we produce a budget for 2022, and then Russia invades Ukraine. So the world today is so complex that giving ourselves the certainty that we know the future is really fooling ourselves. But our entire leadership apparatus is based on tools that were created 150 years ago. So that's this consciousness that we need to shift one leader at a time to create organizations that are more nimble, more adept at recognizing the complexity of the world, and much more able to tackle these challenges for which there's no expertise that has been developed. If you think AI, for example, no one has expertise. No one. There's people who know a little bit more than others. But what will AI look like in 5 years? Absolutely no one on the planet knows. which doesn't prevent lots of people from writing books and viewpoints and all that, and it's fine. But the reality is we don't know.
Mm.
So in a world where the only possible answer is I don't know, why do you bother creating budgets and standard operating procedures and creating pyramidal organizations where you need the power of 1,000 brains, 10,000 brains to figure out, what is going on the ground and capturing little nuggets of information and functioning as a neural network and not as a pyramid? Because the pyramid, by the time the information goes from the bottom to the top and back to the bottom, you've already missed 2 cycles or 3. So we need to change completely the way we think about organizations and the way we think about leadership.
And what strikes me is both the complexity of the world and also time is collapsing in a way. As humans, we're so used to a time span and a certain level of change. But 50 years ago, Moore's law was introduced that started to talk about exponential change and what that really means in terms of doubling of the pace as the cost of technology reduces. But it's not just around technology. There's social changes that have been put in place, the geopolitical situation that's there, the change is there, the growth of Amazon and Apple, and also the proliferation of people who can hustle in their bedrooms and start to disrupt and change. So, yeah, I don't think if I don't think we can win if we feel certain, and it's dancing with the uncertainty, the complexity that really unlocks the chance for people to engage. So I'm completely with you. So walk me through, how you frame that with leaders. Recently, for example, you've been talking a lot about retreats, and your book, The Art of Retreat, as well. Is that how you create space for these explorations?
Yes, and I dedicate a chapter of my book to complexity, and I talk about dancing with complexity. So I love the fact that you've used this term, of embracing complexity and dancing with complexity rather than being afraid of complexity. Because the reaction that we have when we see something we don't understand and something we cannot predict is a reaction of contraction and fear. So, and I don't think there's a need to be afraid of complexity. Of course, we human beings, we want predictability, and more than anywhere else in the corporate world, we want predictability, we want certainty. Tell me what your budget is going to be next year. Tell me what your sales are going to be next year. Tell me how many widgets you're going to sell next year. Tell me what the same store sales per square meter is going to be next year. But the only possible answer in a complex world is I don't know. But if you say that in the corporate world, you usually get fired. It's not a career enhancing move to go to your boss and to say, well, boss, I really don't know. It's potentially the only honest and truthful answer, but it's one that gets you fired. So part of the work that we do with the top teams, because it starts at the top, I don't think this is a change that unfortunately we can initiate from the bottom. You're only going to get yourself fired. If you're too enlightened and too low in the organization, that's bad news.
Yeah.
You have to start at the top, because organizations are top down, right? So I start at the top. I work with the CEOs. I work with the top teams, and we progressively open them to the reality that in a lot of situations, they actually do not know. And it's okay not to know. Of course, there's plenty of situations, for example, if you look at the manufacturing facilities and where you have to know because it's an industrial process. You can predict, what is the throughput in your factory. All that is fine, right? A lot of the world that surrounds us is actually a technical world where things have to be predictable, right? Like trains run on time. Well, maybe not in the UK, but where I come from, trains run on time. Planes fly, they don't crash all the time, right? So we have this predictability in a lot of the technical part of the world, networks, where 4G works, et cetera, et cetera. But when we look at markets, when we look at organization cultures, when we look at our employees, when we look at the reaction of customer segments, a lot of the time, the answer is, I don't know. You launch a new product. When Apple launched the iPhone, they didn't know whether the product was going to take off or not. Because a lot of people launched products that were brilliant, like BlackBerry, and it was a complete flop, right? Or the Palm Pilot, if you're for those listeners of yours that are a little bit more mature. There's a lot of great products that have been launched, but flopped completely. So when you launch the iPhone, now we know it's a fantastic success, but at the time when it was launched, no one knew. And so a lot of what we do in the corporate world, actually, we do not know what's going to happen. We may have hypotheses, we may have scenarios, but we don't know. And so part of the work is to make leaders comfortable with saying, I don't know. Now, back to your question. When you're running at high speed, your brain is in beta waves, you're constantly rushed from one meeting to the other, and in this cadence of work that we have in the corporate world, it's very, very difficult to extract yourself, take a step back, go on the balcony, and say, well, actually, let's be truthful. Do I really know what's going on here, or am I just pretending? So in order to be comfortable with complexity, you need to create a different space, one that doesn't operate at this, internal clock that is on overdrive. Like everywhere in the corporate world, every client I work with have their internal clocks on overdrive, which is great to try to push throughput, but is not great to allow you to take the big picture. The only way that you can really elevate your consciousness is by slowing down your internal clock. And that doesn't happen when you're in the office, in the boardroom, or in the open plan with phones ringing and people talking. You get to extract yourself. You have to create a space, and the space is a physical space, but it's also a mental space that allows you to take this step back. And that's what I call the retreat. Right? The retreat is the step back. Now, there's many ways to do retreats, right? You can go to a monastery, you can go to the Himalayas, you can go into a cave, but that's not very practical for most of my clients. They're not going to start wearing robes and shaving their heads. At least I hope. So what can we do? And what we can do is create individually and collectively with the team, because I think you need to do both. You need to work on the individuals and you need to work on the team. And that's what I do, right? With the individuals and with the team, create a space, regular space, where you take the step back, shut down the phone, go in more silence, in solitude, in a space that usually is connected with nature, because I found that the impact that we have when it doesn't matter whether it's the forest or the sea or the beach or the mountains, but reconnecting ourselves with nature, which is fundamentally where we come from, brings down the agitation of the mind to a level where we're much, much more open. We could say, okay, the brain goes into alpha mode. It's true sometimes, occasionally we remain very cognitive in beta, but you bring people in a different space. You calm them down. We do a lot of meditation in the retreats that we run. I mean, a lot of meditation by the standards of the average executive, right? So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, at the opening of the sessions. We walk in nature. We have days that are very, very unscripted. It's not like I run an agenda where we say we start at 9, we have the first session until 9:30, then we'll have 15 minutes where so-and-so is going to talk to us about the latest. No, we open the space, there's no agenda, we start talking, we start making sense of what's happening. And at the beginning, people say, are you mad or what? And a lot of my colleagues say, Fabrice, this is never going to work, right? These are, people who are used to having an agenda, meetings are time bound. And I say, I insist. And And when they discover the magic of what happens when you have an open-ended agenda, you leave your phones outside of the room. So that's what I call the silence, right? It's not silence because we speak to each other, but we go in silence of technology. We're no longer interrupted by technology, right? Solitude in the sense that we withdraw from the world, we withdraw from the office, we go to a place where we can be by ourselves into a nice space, right? That's the space of retreat. So you can do it with a team, you can do it individually. And every CEO and senior executive I coach, well, first of all, I give them my book, but I also show them how to create short retreats. It could be 1 hour at a time, once a week, once every 2 weeks, even if you're super busy and you have a family and you have commitments, whatever, but create that space for yourself, unscripted space, where you turn off the phone, there's no commitments, you turn off all the electronics, and you withdraw within yourself in that space of silence and solitude and connection with a space that gives you good vibes. And that opens up your spirit. So that's there's many practices within that, right? You can do practices of journaling. There's the practice of conversations, of exploring what is wisdom in all that. There's the practice of meditation, mindfulness, breathing, yoga, drawing, reading poetry, listening to music. A lot of dialogue, of course, but dialogue not in the traditional dialogue where we're actually interrupting each other and not really listening, because when you speak, I'm preparing what I'm going to say next. But dialogue in the sense that when you speak, I really hold the space for you. And Otto Scharmer talks about that, in his books, and getting into this generative listening where I listen for the possibilities in what you describe. And when it's my turn to speak, you listen for the possibilities that arise from what I share with you. And when you start doing that at the level of the executive committee of a large corporation, it's absolutely magical.
The creativity in that space, the solution finding, the possibilities that are generated there they know no bounds. And that's way beyond how are the kids? How was your weekend? How's the weather? But just in a few minutes, by switching modality to generative listening, I think you described it as, you can see how you become more attuned to each other's flow. You start to build a common common goal, a common output. It feels radically different.
It is radically different. We all have it in us because that's where we come from. If you think, right, of 10,000 years ago, sitting by the campfire, sharing stories as a community, it's not that the people 10,000 years ago didn't do problem solving. They probably had more problems than we have. Where is the food going to come from? Why are the gods angry with us? What is the other tribe going to do? Can we trust them or not? I mean, all these, I've never been there. I'm just imagining what life was like 10,000 years ago, but I don't really want to go there. I'm very happy to live in 2024, right? But it's not like they didn't have problem solving, but it's that the connection with each other, the holding the space, listening to each other, telling stories, transforming problems into stories, finding the narrative, making meaning of the world that surrounds us. And the people 10,000 or 5,000 years ago, or the people who wrote Genesis, etc., they were not idiots. They were extremely wise, or the people who wrote the Upanishads, right? They were not idiots. They were extremely sophisticated thinkers, attuned to a level of consciousness that we've lost in most parts of society today. And that's because they were living on a different internal clock. They could make the space for each other, to listen to each other. And so we all have it in us. We're all capable of doing it. It's just that most of the time, we've evolved corporate cultures to say, what do you mean there's no agenda for the meeting? Are you mad or what? What do you mean you need one day for this session? Can we do it, Fabrice? Can we do this session in 30 minutes? Actually, 25, because there's another document, only 16 PowerPoint slides that I would like to show in the remaining 5 minutes. We're all in hyperdrive like that. But when I suggest that we go open-ended without an agenda and we start sharing and we start listening from everyone in the room, I find people have absolutely no difficulties doing that. It's natural.
Mm.
It's just reawakening what we have in us. Nothing else.
And there are so many parallels, not just within the business environment, but at home, in terms of reaching for a thing or for an experience, or have to get the kids to this place and this place and this place, and have to book a holiday and have to. So, let alone the screen scrolling. So it feels like our internal clock doesn't get much of a chance to reset or slow down in either part of our life.
Yeah. And for very understandable reasons. So I don't think we need to throw the baby with the bathwater. We have busy lives because we live in hyperactive societies, and there's a lot of good that comes from that. So I'm really not suggesting that we all go to the countryside to breed, to make cheese or live with goats, and it's not that. It's again, it's not an either or. I think we have to fully appreciate all the benefits of modern life, all the facilities that we have, telecommunications, internet, social media, etc. But see it for what it is, which is, these are tools. They cannot rule our lives. We have to rule them. Right? And this has been, written and even about technology. Heidegger was talking about the fact that we were becoming slaves to our technology. He wrote that in 1954. Yeah. So there's nothing new. We think that everything that we have in our world is new, and our previous generation cannot understand. No, we've always been confronted to the pressure, at least since this second industrial revolution, that has fundamentally changed the world around us in a way that has made it uncomfortable. And that's why we have so many issues, because the human physiology hasn't yet adapted to the world as it is today. We're still fundamentally, there's some physical changes, we're taller, but there's not a lot of changes genetically compared to the human beings that lived 25,000 years ago. But now we live in a world that no longer has days and nights, because we're constantly on. There's light all the time. We can move at great speeds. We don't use our bodies. We don't exercise anymore. So you go to an office, you will take the elevator to your floor. You'll never walk the stairs. You go to a shopping mall, you'll take the escalator to the floor you want to go to, etc. So we don't move, right? You go from A to B, you'll take your car or public transport, you don't walk. And so we've lost the connection with what our bodies, our physiology, our brains were designed to do, which was very good 15 or 25,000 years ago, but it's not so good today to adapt in this world. So we have to reconnect with what we're made of, and at the same time, cope with the demands of work, the demands of society, for the good that we know, like great life expectancy, endless opportunities to find fulfillment. I mean, 150 years ago, it might not have been so easy to find fulfillment in life, because you would pretty much do the same profession. If you were a guy, you would, and your dad is a cobbler, you would be a cobbler. And if you were a woman, you would stay at home and cook and breed kids, right? Today, we can do whatever we want. So I'm not part of those who decry modern world to say it's the cause of all our sorrows. But I think if we can reconnect with our true essence and bring our true essence into this modern world, instead of viewing them in opposition, I think that's where the solution space is.
If we can consciously create some space for that.
Yeah.
So my final question before I invite you to share how we can keep hearing from you. But my final question is really that at this time of year in the summertime, many people take breaks and they find this connection back with their family or with themselves or with nature. What would be your single recommendation to them to consider for when they return, to hold on to that connection?
I think the summertime is a great, at least in the northern hemisphere, is a great time to experiment, because we're usually, if we're on holidays, we're more relaxed, the days are longer, there's like a joy in the air in the summer. I would say experiment, start small. So don't say, oh, I've got to change my life, I'm going to throw everything, I'm going to turn upside down, I'm going to go on a 3-month retreat and throw my phone away. Start with 1 hour or 2. Go for a walk in nature. And sure, carry your phone if for safety, whatever, but don't use it. So go walk in nature for a couple of hours. Go and sit somewhere on the beach, in the mountain, in nature. Bring a notebook with you, and without any agenda, and see what comes to your mind. Once you start slowing down your metabolism, when you start lowering your level of agitation, see what comes up. Start listening to the faint voices of your soul that you normally don't hear because the world is so noisy. So just experiment, couple of hours. Slow down. The 4S of retreats, as I describe in my book, right? Silence. Silence means turning off all the electronics. Solitude. Try that alone. But you could be in solitude in a coffee shop. You could be in a solitude in a space where there's other human beings. You don't need to go and lose yourself in the forest, and then we're going to have to call the police to find you, right? Solitude means you stay by yourself. A space, the third S, a space that is conducive. So you know what the space is. Everyone have their own preferences. It could be a nice, it could be going to a church, or it could be going on the beach, or it could be going in the woods, or a room in your house. Could be anything. Find the space that creates the vibes where you feel at peace. What is the space that gives you peace? And then connect, be willing to connect to your spirit and see what comes up. And then, we talk about a lot of different practices that you can do during this time, but I would just say, try unscripted. Go with just a blank sheet of paper, a pen. Don't bring your tablet to write on your tablet. That's going to defeat the purpose. Real paper, real pen, like in the old days. No, because the connection with the paper, the connection with the pen, again, brings you into a space where, you're not going to be so agitated by the blue light and tapping on a device. And the device is, of course, going to start popping up notifications that, you have a 10% discount voucher for whatever crap you want to buy. So turn off all that stuff. It's killing you. Do it for 1 or 2 hours.
And I think we can all find space and time for that. That's not a huge ask at all.
Yeah. The introverts will find it a lot easier, because the extroverts, of which there's a lot at the top of the corporate world, because there's a bias towards people who are more socialized and talk more to others, right? So there's a little bit of a bias against introverts, but the introverts will find it easy because it's a natural space to recharge, to go inward and reconnect with yourself, whereas extroverts tend for recharging, they tend to prefer to be surrounded by other people and talking to other people. So the extroverts will find it a little bit more difficult. But I would say to all the extroverts out there, just give it a try. Trust me, give it a try. Don't make yourself miserable, but try for an hour or two, and you'll come back and thank me. But this is a great practice for the summer.
Fabrice, thank you for bringing your wisdom and clarity and guidance. There are so many insights within this episode. It's definitely one that I really want to revisit and also to explore more of your work. So how can our listeners follow your work and perhaps experience you firsthand?
Well, the easiest is to connect with me on LinkedIn or to follow me on LinkedIn, because that's where I'm most active. That's the only social media I use. I have a website where I occasionally publish some reflections and updates on retreats and activities that I do. And then if you want to go a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we've discussed today, the book that I published, The Art of Retreat, I think is suitable for anyone who wants to put a little bit more depth and introspection into their leadership, to find more balance, to find more clarity, to find more purpose. So that would be the ways to stay in touch. I would love that.
We'll make sure that all of those links are within the show notes, and really the very practical approaches that you bring to calming that internal clock. They feel so important and not yet forgotten. So this is our chance to grab that notion and to carve out the time. So I'd love to hear how your experiments go. So please do drop us a note, leave us a comment here, like, share, reflect. It's we really want to be there with you guys on your journey. Fabrice, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this episode. It was juicy, I have to say. It was really good fun. So thank you. And I long for the world that you're starting to build with leaders. And so thank you. And for now, listeners, like, subscribe, share, and join us again for another episode of Exponential Potential. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.